Cultural Christianity is crumbling under its own apathy, and it might just be time to take a lesson from a monk about how to reform our society. Let's get into it.
I think we Christians today have to ask ourselves, how can we live in this world in such a way that when we are put to the test, we choose the Lord no matter what it costs us, even to the point of martyrdom?
My name is Casey. I've been a therapist and a husband and father for more than a decade, and I started this channel in order to try to reform a culture that my children can thrive in. If you can agree with that framing, let's like, share, and subscribe, and I'd love to try to earn your support.
In preserving the Shire, we embrace the Benedict Option, finding strength in community and tradition.
In Rod Dreher's book, he discusses the Benedict Option, which was the option taken by a monk in about 500 AD after he saw the collapse of the Roman Empire, and what would happen if he leaned into that culture is that he would lose his faith. So he wrote a book about how to behave within a monastery and change the world, because those small Christian communities that persisted at the fall of the Roman Empire ended up being the way forward through the Dark Ages, taking the Christian worldview into the next age.
He saw there the Roman Empire had fallen officially about 24, 25 years earlier. He saw chaos and moral degradation.
Dreher calls on Christians to withdraw from the empire of lies and withdraw from the culture in order to form monastic communities, much like was done by Benedict in 500 AD or the following 100 years after. And these monastic communities ended up showing Christians the way forward. So what does that look like? And is this actually time to pull the lever on the Benedict Option? Or is it worth leaning into the culture war so that we can continue to fight to make a Christian nationalist movement?
We're not monks. If we're called to the monastery, great. But most of us are called to live in the world. But we have to find a way to live in the world without becoming of the world. If we try too hard to conform to the world today, we're going to lose our faith.
Dreher makes the case that our institutions are fragile and that technology is discipling people faster than the church ever could. He's gone over to Europe and seen what their post-Christian society looks like, and he believes that those stalwartness of those Christians is increased by the amount of persecution that they have. He says that the problem in the West is that America has an apathetic Christian worldview, but also believes that they have the moral majority, which actually has fallen apart in recent years.
The so-called option, which is a choice that I believe all faithful Christians living in this post-Christian society have to make. We have to be willing to turn our backs on shoring up this empire, so to speak, and which is to say, being affirmative of this order, this post-Christian order, and instead work on building the kind of small communities in our parishes, in schools, and otherwise, where we can pass on the faith to our children and live it out in a real way. Now, that's going to take more than simple catechism. It's going to take an entire conversion of way of life.
Dreher harkens back to the fall of Rome in order to promote the building of intentional community and doing it in such a way that you're apart enough from the culture that you don't become a victim of it. And he encourages this within the household first and within intentional communities like church, but also schools and education, classical education, Christian education. However, if we lean into the institutions that have already been built, Dreher claims we are actually going to lean further into a system that is dissolving around itself. And most Christian communities are built around a worldview more in line with the modern secular worldview than would have ever been recognizable to Christians in worlds past.
3 years to pray and to fast and seek the Lord's will. He came out, he founded monasteries and wrote this famous rule. It's just how to live in a monastery. And this little thin book was one of the most influential in Western history, because during the so-called Dark Ages, in the remnants of what had been the Western Empire, the church was the only government, and monks in their monasteries were often the only source of stability in a really wild and chaotic
Probably
area.
more than anything, Dreher calls for a moral courage which would come when persecution increases. And of course, as we see the political winds blowing towards further persecution, and with the death of Charlie Kirk, of course, we see that our worldview is subject to people actively wanting us destroyed because of what we believe and because of what has been believed in the West for 2,000 years. So Dreyer says that these will come with several points. Thick Christian communities, so churches that are steeped in tradition and actually have a structure that allows for intentional communities that are more than just a gathering on Sunday. He says Christian education, of course, which could come with homeschooling or classical educational institutions, embodied practice, rhythms of prayer, meals together, and real intentional community, possibly even being as close to being neighbors as you could be. And then moral courage when it's necessary and when the people come for Charlie Kirk or they come for us individually as we gain influence. If we happen to be that blessed, then we would have the moral courage to go anywhere necessary, including unto death, to defend our faith first, which Dreyer claims is not a prevalent characteristic of the current church.
Crisis, because they have already been living with de-Christianization for 2 or 3 generations now. The trouble is in America getting people to believe that this is actually going to happen. In my book, I write about the statistics, what social scientists and others are seeing about the way people are falling away from the church and the way the churches are falling away from anything that looks like historic Christian orthodoxy.
This is sort of a refutation of the Billy Graham evangelical movement in that Dreyer is calling for more of a monastic, go back to intentional communities and then hope to reform the world at a later time. Whereas the Billy Graham evangelical movement would say we need to lean into the culture and affect the culture as much as possible. So he has come under a lot of criticism for being defeatist, but in fact, he's looking probably more at reform than retreat in this work, the Benedict Option.
But we're going to have to suffer more loss, I'm afraid, in this country before Christians actually wake up. So the greatest obstacle to the Benedict Option right now is, first of all, the unwillingness of Christians to look around and recognize how serious, to read the signs of the times and recognize how serious things are, and therefore to make the sort of difficult decisions that need to be made in order to build themselves and their families up for what's to come. Secondly, we have to be able to find each other. And that's something I'm trying to work on now. I've been working with a donor on building a Benedict Option website that will be there solely to connect people from the different Christian traditions to find each other.
Whether you agree with him or not, Dreyer's point is that the world doesn't need Christians who blend into it. It needs ones with moral character and a reflection of a life worth living, which of course comes with Christ at the center, and not in a way that is just mealy-mouthed and accepting of all the moral winds that have blown throughout our culture in the last 100 years, especially in the last 80. And if you can agree with that vision, I find it tempting, personally, having 4 children of my own, that this would be an option if and when the culture burns. That's part of the reason why we've started homesteading, homeschooling, and many other home-oriented institutions, including finding a church where liturgical, traditional, moral framework is of the utmost importance to them, including intentional community. These are the tenets of the Benedict Option, and they are being played out in my life personally out of instinct to try to raise and form kids that are resilient against a culture, not leaning into it.